Two daycare workers in Minnesota are accused of unthinkable abuse against the children in their care. Now, they both face assault charges as police reveal the alleged abuse was all caught on camera. We're speaking with a state lawmaker who says he pulled his own young daughter out of that daycare not long before these employees were arrested. Welcome to Sidebar, presented by Law&Crime. I'm Jesse Weber. Two women are out on bond in the Minneapolis area after being arrested and charged with 3 counts each of malicious punishment of a child and 1 count each of third-degree assault of a victim under age 4. On July 16th, it's been reported that a parent called 911 to report potential child abuse at a daycare center in Blaine, Minnesota. According to this statement of probable cause, the 5-month-old's parents, remember that age, noticed bruising on her thighs, groin, buttocks, and legs. They contacted the daycare center to inquire about the bruising and were told it might be from the chair or swing in the infant room. Officers found out that the 2 employees for Infant 1's room, that's how this infant's being identified, Infant 1, were 24-year-old Chloe K. Johnson and 22-year-old Elizabeth Wiemerslage. When police questioned Johnson, she reportedly said she saw some redness on Infant 1's pelvic area in the afternoon on the 15th and then saw it had turned to bruising on the 16th, but she allegedly said the bruising could come from infant chairs. Then, when police questioned Wiemerslage, she said she didn't see any redness or bruising, but if there was, it was caused by the swing or chair. You know what the issue with that is? Police say there is surveillance video that shows what actually happened inside of that infant room. Now, I have to warn you, we obviously cover really horrifying crimes on Sidebar. There's no secret about that. This, though, is incredibly difficult to hear. I'm giving you that warning right now. With that in mind, and I apologize for this, but it's important to understand the allegations. Here we go. The probable cause statement reads, around 9:07 a.m., Defendant Johnson is sitting with Infant 1 on a floor mat and starts moving Infant 1 around aggressively. Over the next several minutes, Defendant Johnson grabs Infant 1 by her upper thighs, hip, and groin area and violently flips Infant 1 back and forth from her stomach to her back, not allowing Infant 1 to remain on one side for longer than a few seconds. Infant 1's arms are flailing outward, and her body is consistently rigid as her face contacts the floor mat repeatedly as she is being flipped and her head is unsupported. There's no audio, but Infant 1 appears to be screaming with her mouth open as this is happening. Absolutely horrific. And this statement explains that Wiemerslage is there as this is going on and is seemingly watching this, but let's continue. In the video, Defendant Johnson is also seen picking up another infant, Infant 2, roughly, and holding a cloth over the infant's mouth and nose for several seconds while Infant 2 is crying. Defendant Johnson is gripping Infant 2 firmly by the neck before she violently pulls them up by the arm and shoves a bottle repeatedly in and out of Infant 2's mouth too rapidly for Infant 2 to be drinking from it. Later in the video, Defendant Johnson is seated next to Defendant Wiemerslage, who picks up Infant 2 and violently slams the infant down onto a support pillow. At another time, Defendant Wiemerslage is seen picking up another infant, Infant 3, and aggressively shoving them down onto a changing table. It goes on to state that Defendant Wiemerslage aggressively drags Infant 1 towards her by her legs before she picks her up aggressively and slams Infant 1 into a support pillow and presses down hard on Infant 1's torso and abdomen. You know, it's almost impossible to comprehend what is going on. And we haven't seen the video of this. I don't think I even want to see the video of this. But video of these children being tossed around like literal rag dolls, that's the accusation right now. So remember, Infant 1's parents are the ones who made the initial report, but according to court documents, Infant 2 and Infant 3 underwent medical examinations for potential injuries, and more bruising was found. And one of the babies had a leg fracture, believed to be about 2 weeks old. The probable cause document states, medical reports indicate that Infant 1 sustained bruising in 9 different areas on her body, including her groin, buttocks, thighs, shins, and abdomen. The report indicates the bruises range from 1 centimeter to 5 centimeters in length, are consistent with a grip injury or squeeze type injury, and are inconsistent with a chair or strap injury. The reports further diagnose the bruising as inflicted injuries due to the bruising pattern and immobility of infant one. So if this makes its way to trial and these defendants try to fight it, this could be a battle of the experts talking about how these children received these injuries. Is there one set of causes? Is there only one way this could happen? We see this a lot in abuse cases and abuse trials. Now, according to police, quote, defendant Johnson initially told officers she was helping the infants learn how to roll over, but ultimately admitted she was too rough and admitted her behavior could have caused infant one's bruising. Defendant Wiemerslage also admitted to her behavior and that it was wrong. Both women were released on $75,000 bail. They're due back in court separately, one in August, one in September. The maximum sentence, our understanding, for each count is 5 years, so they could potentially face a max of 20 years in prison if they go to trial and are convicted. Blaine police said in a statement, quote, although we have been forced to investigate other terrible acts of child abuse, this one is exceptionally shocking. Most parents drop their children off at daycare centers believing that their children will be safe, especially since there's usually more than one care provider watching their child at any one given time. In this case, we found 2 workers working together with infants, both aggressively abusing children. This is a sad case, but it is an important one to tell nonetheless. And one of the reasons we're able to present you stories like this and talk about the law and talk about the facts is in large part to the support we get from our sponsors. And that includes Morgan & Morgan, America's largest injury law firm. Look, if you should find yourself in a position where you're hurt and you need legal representation, Morgan & Morgan may be who you want in your corner because they are specialists in this area. And they're so big because they win a lot. Verdicts and settlements in the multi-millions across this country. They make the process super easy for their clients because from starting your claim to uploading documents to signing contracts and talking to your legal team, it can all be done from your smartphone. So if you're injured, you can easily start a claim at forthepeople.com/LC Sidebar. The daycare provider Small World Learning Center released a statement to KSTP in Minneapolis saying, quote, we as a company do not condone the acts of the 2 individuals involved in the incident. The 2 teachers in question were terminated immediately and indefinitely. We are remaining open to continue supporting our families who rely on us for care and stability during this difficult time. We want to remind everyone that in the 24 years that Small World Learning Center organization has been open, that this is the first time something of this nature has happened. We have a team of fully dedicated teachers who love what they do and are here for the safety and well-being of the children in their care. We are cooperating with the Blaine Police Department and DHS to locate any weaknesses in our policies and procedures to ensure this does not happen again. But these may not have been the only children to experience abuse at this daycare center. Why? A man named Cody Pesh posted on Facebook, 2 daycare teachers were caught on camera abusing infants at Small World Learning Center in Blaine, Minnesota, and our 5-month-old son was one of them. He received scratches and bruises all over his body and suffered a fractured leg from their abuse. The despicable humans that did this were arrested on Thursday but are already out on bail. Please share this post so the world knows what these evil human beings did. Another woman, Rihanna Lee, said she pulled her child out of that same daycare center. She posted, I pulled Gray from this daycare after multiple mysterious incidents where he kept hurting himself, where I'd come pick him up with a bloody nose, marks in his body, rug burn, etc., just to find out a month later that 2 of the teachers that were in his room were caught abusing kids. People knew what was going on there and did nothing. And that brings me to our guest today, Minnesota State Representative Nolan West, who, it's our understanding, his daughter attended Small World Learning Center. Now, Nolan posted on X, quote, these monsters tortured our baby. They were the caretakers when Sybil was there. She was always upset and sad when we picked her up. We have pictures of unexplained bruising. Their explanations were fishy, but we never assumed the worst. We moved our baby to Primrose, and she completely changed and was always cheerful. We never assumed that it was because she was always being abused. I am learning that many other parents have the same story, and this seems to have been going on for quite some time. This is absurd and infuriating and totally unacceptable. I agree. Representative West joins me right now from Minnesota. Representative, thank you so much for coming on to talk about this. I know it can't be easy, and it's kind of shocking to hear what we're talking about. If you can, though, if you can explain your experience at this daycare center, because again, it's kind of unbelievable to think about.
Yeah, I mean, you would literally never expect it. So those two teachers, one of them we actually never really liked. I mean, never in a million years would we think she was doing anything. But like we'd hand Sybil to her, and my daughter, and she'd freak out, like
Mm.
bloody murder. And it's like, oh, she loves us so much, and like because the other possibility doesn't enter your mind. But the other teacher, never in a million years would I like even more so seemed like a lovely person, seemed like she actually did like our child, uh and like so we had about two incidents reports a week while Sybil was there, and it's our first baby, so we didn't like okay, well, my wife was very on the ball. Her motherly instincts kicked in. I was just like, well, how could so stupidly I thought this is normal, but I had no frame of reference. My wife was smart enough to take pictures, which we did get to submit to the police and tell them our story. So hopefully that can help bring them to justice, because those pictures were from last year, late last year,
Wow.
and they didn't get arrested, as we know, until July. So this is nuts.
Wait,
And
wait.
that was our experience.
Let's
Lots of
amplify that.
excuses.
You sent the pictures to police a year ago and nothing happened?
Oh, no, 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 no. Um, I thought it was nothing,
Okay,
which
okay.
I'm incredibly embarrassed about. Like my wife has been very gracious with me because
Sure.
this is, yeah. My wife took pictures just in case.
Okay.
And sure enough, she said something in me told me I need to document this. But we didn't submit him to the police. That just happened 2 days ago.
Well, first of all, please do not blame yourself because again, it's hard to imagine that this could happen. And as I mentioned earlier on, there's one thing for one person to be accused of this, but there's a group there, there's multiple people. And so you would think that there's people supervising other people and watching what's happened. Here you have two who have been accused of abusing. So it's, again,
Doing it
please.
together.
Exactly. That's
Together.
one of the most shocking things about it. What was your reaction when this came out?
Oh, it's utter disbelief. Like, oh, well, one, they said teachers at Small World is how I heard about it. I like while I was reading this Facebook post, which is actually one of the big problems, is the vast majority, all but like two families, discovered that any of this was going on from a Facebook post, not from the daycare telling them. I mean, like the daycare should tell you when police are investigating. I mean, but the families found out in this Facebook post. I was reading it. I was like, oh, that's strange. It sounds like they're talking about where Sybil was. And then seeing the mugshots of her two teachers was just, even while reading it, I didn't immediately assume. Well, especially because one of them seemed so nice and lovely, honestly. Uh, and yeah, we did. Then you saw it, and it was completely flabbergasting. I couldn't believe it.
Did you confront them about what happened to Sybil?
So my wife did. I wish she was here, but she's working right now. Um, one of the bruises they didn't even report, but we didn't see it until later, and that was like a 2-inch bruise, about an inch wide. Posted the picture on her shin, which when you hear about the police reports of how they were flipping children by grabbing their legs, makes perfect sense, which is just mortifying. And then there was this a bruise straight across her back along her ribs, and my wife confronted them about that one. That one did have an incident report, and they said, "Well, we think it might have been the chair. Um, sometimes a strap can hurt him," and which isn't that. I found out they gave that exact same explanation to other families, and then there was another like more targeted like red dot, almost like being poked with something. Now I don't know what happened. I'm not a forensic expert, but they said that was from rolling over a magnet. And then they showed my wife the magnet because she's like, that doesn't sound right. And it still didn't sound right, but it's like you look at it now and you're like, how could you not know? But it's just so far from our minds that this apparently lovely person was harming our child.
It's hard to think that people could do this. Or allegedly do this. I mean, look, they are innocent until
Yeah.
proven guilty. But let me ask you this: you and your wife felt that there was enough to take Sybil out of there, though, right?
No, it's just continuing embarrassment for me. So we moved daycares because we need one open later. And we didn't realize, like, when we started to go, wait a minute, there is something wrong there, was when we brought her to the new daycare, because they were open till 6. Really, that's the reason we moved. But then Sybil was never sad, never, like, we brought her there. She's happy. She reaches for the teachers. She can't wait to see them. They can't wait to see her. Everybody knows, like, everybody's like, hey, Sybil, when you walk in there. Then when you pick her up, she's always doing something. Her diaper's clean. That's another. There was a time when they didn't change her diaper for 5 hours. They told us they forgot to log it. But now we're pretty sure that they weren't even doing that much for these kids. But at the then we're like, wait, what was wrong with that old daycare? But then again, we're just like, man, they're just a bad daycare. We didn't think for a minute, obviously. I've said that like 100 times. I can't.
No. I'm glad you're emphasizing, because you're not alone in this, and this is not the only case that we've seen of this. But did you have interactions with any other people at that daycare that you may believe might have been engaging in the same kind of conduct or alleged conduct?
Of other teachers at the daycare?
Yeah.
Well, so no, not any other teachers that we can surmise. I've nothing. I mean, there's some things we could talk about in terms of reporting, because, and this is freaky, one of the teachers who did the older infants, she also had a baby in the younger infants, and she brought concerns to the leadership of the daycare, saying, I've got weird bruising on my child. And in her words, because I was in a meeting with like 30 some other teachers, 30 some angry parents, and the only, okay, I need to finish that. And in that meeting, she said the director completely blew her off twice. And that is likely going to be an issue for them in the future. But it's, so you look at, even teachers were victims here that trusted that their kids would be fine in the daycare where they work.
Wow, that's incredibly alarming. Have you considered legal action?
Well, we're considering everything. I mean, the parents are well organized in terms of, after that meeting, all met at a coffee shop near there, which actually, the only way I heard about the meeting going on, because I pulled my child, and even one of the families that are the infant 1 and 2, they didn't know about the meeting either, because they immediately pulled their child as soon as this all started. So because they pulled their child, they didn't feel like they needed to be notified of a meeting to tell them about it. I was at a meeting at the coffee shop that they ended up going to later, and I saw like 50 cars in the parking lot. I'm like, okay, I think I know what that's about. And I just went in there. And that's the only reason I heard about the meeting. The families didn't hear about the meeting until after 10 p.m. the night before. And like, their daycare was closed the next day. I mean, for good reason, but these poor families are now out of a daycare for the foreseeable, likely forever, I would guess, but at least for the foreseeable future.
It's hard to trust the daycare after this experience too. By the way, how is Sybil doing right now?
Oh, she's doing well. She hasn't walked yet, but she was sick yesterday. So I was home with her. I actually did an interview with her in my lap. She's ridiculously adorable. She's doing very well. But the other infants, so one of the things that's read about in the police report, which I didn't finish because it's literally the worst reading you can imagine if you have a child. They would put the baby on its stomach and then like press on it. And I don't know, like, other than causing harm, I can't imagine why they would do that. And that baby you do tummy time with your young infants to, acclimate them to the world, and the baby will not go on its stomach anymore, one of their children. And it's just horrifying. But Sybil appears to be fine. The only thing that really frightened me is the kid that got the fractured leg had no symptoms. So they didn't know they didn't know that there was a fractured leg until they went to the doctor and this came up. So that freaked me out about Sybil, because maybe she did and we just never noticed because she wasn't walking. But she can put weight on it now and stuff, so I think she's okay.
Obviously, this is going to be an ongoing criminal case. You may very well have to testify at a trial, or be compelled to testify at a trial about this if they decide to, not take a deal, or this doesn't make it to trial. But would you be prepared to testify against these two women and recount your experience? Because it's horrifying. And what your description, I unfortunately read the whole statement, the probable cause statement. It's incredibly difficult. It's so consistent with these other accounts. Would you and your wife be prepared to testify if you had to?
So that's one thing that they only keep a week of footage. So there's like no footage of my baby being there. So I was worried that, oh, well, we got these pictures, but we can add to pattern maybe, but we can't get our own charges or anything like that. But maybe we can, the more I hear about how the investigation is going. And absolutely, my wife in particular is perfect because she confronted them on this and she can recount those conversations.
Right.
And yeah, I would definitely no, we're going to be there every step of the way. We don't care if we just sit there and do nothing. Sure. But if it is in any way possible to be there as they move through the process, August 12th is one of their, I believe it's the arraignment for one of them. And then the other one's September 19th. Right. And we will be there every day that that the public is allowed to be there. And if we can testify to help get justice for all these kids, because it sounds like this is at least going on for a year, in my opinion. We'll do whatever we can to make it happen.
And I have to conclude by asking this, as a lawmaker, have you looked at possibly changes in the law to police this, to see if this is more of an ongoing issue, to perhaps stricter penalties for this? Unfortunately, given your experience, I wonder if this is something that you and your colleagues might now be looking into, because this is unfortunately not the first case I've heard of child abuse in daycare centers.
Yeah, when I was talking to the detective, I just thought about how horrible it was for them to hear. I'm sure they've heard 50 of these stories. It's every month. But yeah, no, absolutely. Like the balance is, you don't want to, daycare is already super expensive. We don't want to load them up with additional mandates. So I'm hesitant to go nuts on it, but it's my number one priority. And like, for example, they wouldn't be being brought to justice without the cameras. There's almost for sure no. And when you look, and my new daycare, which I love, they're amazing. They actually don't have cameras in their room, which I'm like, oh, I just assumed daycares had to have cameras. I think that is one thing we need to look at. Look at that better be law at some point to make sure that, especially in infant rooms. Now, there's a lot to go through because we don't want to add more cost to an already outrageously expensive thing. But when it comes to health and safety, I think focusing on camera and storage retention, because you look at, they only had a week of footage, and I do video work outside the legislature, and I can tell you, it's like you can store a whole lot of footage on a $100 like 10 terabyte hard drive. Especially if you're compressing and archiving it. So that is my number one priority. Other things like notifying parents if police show up, that seems like an easy one. Right. And then incident reports in particular, when there is one, having more than one person sign these incident reports. So not just the parent and the teacher, but the two people from the daycare, just so if one person continues to perpetrate this, at least they don't have an excuse for not knowing. And then it looks like that people didn't know who to report to. So people were telling the superior about abuse, is what it sounds like. And that didn't go anywhere. Well, technically, as under the mandatory reporting, you're supposed to report to law enforcement, a healthcare practitioner, or the county. So maybe they just didn't know. They should have had training on that when they became staff at that institution. So re-examining that in some way. But those lots, and then making sure parents have access to video when they have an incident report. So even if it's nothing, letting the parent know that, especially with this in mind, I think is only a good thing. So looking at those, this is also done with the thought of, we don't want to make it even more expensive because it's already crazy expensive. Let's make sure that, my hope is we can add something to this safety package to also make daycare more affordable or ease the regulatory burden and things that don't have to do with, health and safety of the infants.
Those are incredibly important initiatives. I'm wishing you luck on them. I think that those would be very well needed, especially in light of the story we just talked about. And listen, Representative West, thank you so much for coming on. I know, again, it's not easy sharing this experience. I'm sending my best to you and your family, and also to all the other families who have experienced this. It's really an unthinkable story, but it's important to bring it to everybody's attention nonetheless. Wishing you the best of luck, and really thank you for the work that you do.
Thank you so much. I appreciate you broadcasting this. People need to know.
All right, everybody, that's all we have for you right now here on Sidebar. Thank you so much for joining us. And as always, please subscribe on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, YouTube, wherever you get your podcasts. I'm Jesse Weber. Speak to you next time.